Life in the United States is certainly different than when I was young. I was born in 1966, so we all sort of grew up knowing what the value system was, what the moral system was, what the mores were, and things over time have changed. In fact, it's changed so much that today I think people who were born when I was born are looking at an America that's very, very different. To that point, I want to get with Pastor Lucas Miles, Senior Faith Director at TPUSA, also has got a brand new book out called Pagan, Confronting America's Godless Uprising. Good to see you, Pastor. Nice to meet you.
Joe, good to be on the show.
I'm older than you are, so maybe you saw this more in your upbringing. But when I was born, and from as far back as I can remember, we had this arching ideology that this was a Judeo-Christian society. We believed in certain things. We were against other things. And fast forward 59 years, and things are very, very different. Was it a gradual thing? Was it an all of a sudden thing? Why didn't we notice this happening?
Yeah, I definitely think it was sort of a frog in boiling water sort of situation here. This has been going on for a while. I trace back in my new book, really starting, in the late 1800s, we start seeing kind of this obsession with occultic and mystic ideas that slowly built over time. And they worked their way into the church. They worked their way into, academic, organizations and universities and things. They've worked their way into the just ethos of the American people. And so when you kind of finally look around and you see it here, sometimes it feels like it came really fast. But I think it's been building for much, much longer than people realize.
Was this a concerted effort, or did we fall asleep? Did we just fall into this? I guess what I'm asking is, there a group of people that said we can de-Christianize this country if we work at it?
Yeah, when we talk about this idea of what is a pagan threat, I believe the pagan threat is not just individual people who are practicing, paganism, like, somebody who practices Wicca or a yogi or something like that.
Right.
What I'm speaking to is the intentional supplanting of this Christian worldview and introducing a post-Christian worldview, specifically in this case paganism, so that Marxism can be adopted. And specifically, it's that critical paganism, that critical theory plus paganism concoction that we're seeing that is really causing the most damage. I think wokeism has shown its true colors, and they are pagan in nature. And so I think that this is intentional. I think it's funded. I think it's contrary, or let's say it this way, contrast that with the revival that took place after the death of Charlie Kirk, that was organic in nature, that there was just a response where people are like, I got to get back to church, Bible sales are up, all of this sort of thing. That's not funded. It's just response. But paganism we're seeing is funded, and it's pushed on network television. It's pushed in cartoons to kids. It's pushed in, curriculum in universities and, K through 12 schools. And there's a concerted effort to supplant the Christian worldview of this nation to introduce this pagan view so that Marxism can really reign and rule.
The website is lucasmiles.org, lucasmiles.org. Go get the book called Pagan Threat, Confronting America's Godless Uprising. It's now number 4 in the New York Times bestseller list. Congratulations on that. It's only been out for about a month. So as I'm hearing you speak, I can see the machinations around us where we ended up where we are today. You're right that a revival is happening. You're right. People are buying Bibles. You're right. People are saying, wait a second. The sword of the word really is the way Christianity is spread. It's not to just turn the other cheek and pretend like people aren't acting out. So how do we get back to that? And the reason I ask is I'm not sure I understand the motivation behind a group of people that don't want us to have a value system here. And maybe I'll expand it this way. And Pastor, please, jump in at any time. George Soros obviously wants anarchy. I believe the reason is because he wants the WEF or Davos or the globalists to run the entire globe, and he can't do that if we remain American, if we remain independent, if we remain a Judeo-Christian society. So is that the goal, just to have ultimate power over us, or is there something even more sinister going on?
Yeah, I think that there's those out there that are just, power hungry and they want control. But I think for many within this spectrum, there's really a religious component here. And I think that's what's easily missed. And when you look at somebody like, say, the philosopher Hegel, he taught this idea that basically that man would kind of wrestle through these various conflicting ideas through what, he called the Hegelian dialectic. And that on the other side of that will eventually reach perfection, where God will look down and see the perfection in humanity, recognize the perfection in himself, and then we'll have this utopia. Of course, Marx takes that and others later, and you get this idea of sort of this socialist or communist utopia framework. And I think there's a lot of people that are pushing towards that. But now there's a religious component behind that. And I think that when you start understanding the religious side of this, it's more than just about, control. It's actually about kind of religious zealousness, that they're trying to produce this perfect world, that it's man making the world in our image rather than allowing God to remake this world in his. And so there's Christianity and progressivism in many ways want the same thing. They want progress of the human race. The difference is Christianity has a destination in mind, and that is to be conformed in the image of Christ, where progressivism is really just progress for progress' sake, hoping that some sort of socialist utopia is going to come out on the other side of a totalitarian regime, which in fact is never the case. We've seen 100 million people die at the hands of socialism in the last 100 years, and I expect the results to continue that way if we keep trying this, so-called experiment of socialism.
Pagan Threat is the name of the book. It's out right now. Confronting America's Godless Uprising is the subtitle. It is author and pastor Lucas Miles. Go to lucasmiles.org. I'm guessing you can get it anywhere you get books, right? Amazon and so on.
Yep, absolutely. Everywhere you can find them.
Go and get them. So how do you respond to this? Yeah, I'm a Christian. I'm a true believer. Jesus Christ is my Lord and Savior. But the argument you get from the progressive left or by the pagans is turn the other cheek. Love thy neighbor as thyself. Thou shalt not kill. Why are you for the death penalty? How do you respond to that? Because they try to use the religion against those who follow it. And I think a lot of people who are weak-minded or weak-hearted about it go, yeah, you know what? You're right. I probably should not judge that person, even if the person's robbing a bank or raping people. How do you sort of balance that out? How do you equalize that when they throw that stuff at you? You're supposed to love everybody. What's the matter? How do you respond to that?
Christianity, and really the Bible specifically, has a very easy answer for this, and that is that Jesus came, it says, in both grace and truth. And so when you understand that both of those things are necessary to form love. That love, God's kind of love specifically, the love that Jesus manifested, is the combination of grace and truth. We see this at the woman at the well, where Jesus, essentially says, he who has, without sin, cast the first stone. And then he also offers grace to the woman who's caught in the act of adultery, but then he tells her, go and sin no more. There's these two parts of, really in play of grace and truth that are living out in this. Regarding the death penalty, we see in Romans 13 that it's the job of a righteous state to carry the sword for those who do evil and to protect those who do good. The moment that the state stops doing that or flips that around, we saw during the Biden administration, we see this in places like England and Australia where, Christians are arrested for simply praying silently on street corners. This is a state that is it's lost its way. It is now punishing those who do good and protecting those who do evil. And so it's very important that a state maintains its right to hold and to, yield or, wield the sword, in these situations. It's the job of the Christian. We can forgive, but we want a strong state that can carry out such punishments, because this is what prevents us from falling into, chaos and anarchy. If Jesus were here to rule and reign at this moment, then the state wouldn't be required to have such powers. But until Christ comes back, it's dependent upon the state to be that deterrent for evil behavior.
Get this book, Pagan Threat. It is by Pastor Lucas Miles. Charlie famously said, we always forget the sin no more part. We always forget to add that, because at that point, he's giving a directive, do not sin anymore. Not only to her, but I think to those who are surrounding her when he said, he without sin cast the first stone. We always forget the harsh part, which is the directive part, which is this is how you should live part. And I'll compare it to the First Amendment of the Constitution. Congress shall make no law regarding the establishment of religion. We always forget the part that says, nor, get in the way of how you want to worship however you want. We always forget that second part, just, you can't have the Bible in school. Was that the start of it, Pastor, do you think, in the late 50s, when you had these nut jobs pushing as hard as they could and successfully getting the Bible out of school? Was that the beginning of this?
It was in full swing, but it wasn't actually the beginning. One of the things I go back to in the late 1800s, there was a group of women in first wave feminism that they put out a Bible, basically commentary called the Women's Bible, where they went through and basically tried to counter all these various passages in Scripture, speaking against, various forms of Christianity. They even put a female deity into the Trinity.
Wow.
This was the roots of early paganism. It's worked its way into, all sorts of other things that it goes from there. Eventually Planned Parenthood, Margaret Sanger, and then the sexual revolution, pornography industry, all of these things are driven by this. So, taking prayer out of schools, this was a major factor, a major turning point in this nation in a negative sense. But it was very much, in full swing, I think, already at this point. And we've continued to see the dominoes fall since then.
The foreword on this book is written by Charlie Kirk, Pagan Threat, Confronting America's Godless Uprising. It is Pastor Lucas Miles, and I really enjoy talking with you. When they do things like promote pornography or promote promiscuity or promote, marriage doesn't really matter anymore, go and live your life, don't have any kids, what's the end goal? Are they trying to cull the herd? Do you know why they want such a strange, godless society?
So in my book, I trace this quite a bit, specifically starting with first wave feminism and kind of working all the way through not only sexual revolution, but now ultimately where we are with, kind of pornography being accessible to everybody's fingertips through their cell phones and OnlyFans and all this sort of stuff.
I mean, it's on X. I mean, it's literally on like Twitter. I mean, you can't get away from it. It's pervasive now. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Just want to make sure that people understand. You don't have to go to OnlyFans to find it. It's everywhere.
Yes, absolutely. That's 100% true. 100% true. And I think that part of this is when you look at what the drivers were in, feminism, it was a driver not just to gain equality. There's nothing wrong. In fact, we should support, women. The Bible teaches were pulled from Adam's rib. They were equal. They came from his side. They're supposed to be partners and co-heirs in life. But what we've seen is this attempt to kind of it's what Hegel would call a master-slave dialectic, where one always has to rule over the other. And I think that the goal right now in pornography is to enslave men specifically through pornography, although women are affected by this as well, and ultimately for true female liberation to happen through being able to control men through these efforts. Now, again, this isn't just about men versus women. There's a lot of people on both sides of this that are making a ton of money and getting rich off of this sort of behavior. But there is a pagan and a religious component to this about this. And you read the writings that gave birth to these movements. They're all about the divine feminine, about we have to unleash this divine feminine, and that sexual revolution is really a form of worship, that everything is sacred, the body is sacred, abortion is sacred, birth is sacred, and when everything is sacred, essentially nothing is sacred. And I think they have lost sight of true sacredness, which we find in the teachings of the Bible, the teachings of Jesus Christ. We need revival in this nation. It's starting to happen. We're seeing it, but we have to steward it well right now. And we have to do a lot of work in order to reach this next generation and pray that God's grace would give us the power to be able to do that.
In only about a month, it's on the New York Times bestseller list. The book is called Pagan Threat, Confronting America's Godless Uprising. It is Pastor Lucas Miles. Go to lucasmiles.org. He's the senior faith director at TPUSA. You mentioned Margaret Sanger. How is it that we're still falling for the okie doke there? This is a woman that hated black people, thought they were the weeds of society and should be taken out. She would partner up with pastors in black communities to make sure that young black women got abortions and didn't have black babies. We know that. Her name is still on this organization. Planned Parenthood not only still exists, but we're sending them $500 million a year of taxpayer money. How is that so ingrained in our society? I mean, if you talk to black people in America in 2025, they're waking up. And they're understanding that they've been victimized, not by the right, but by the left, an awful lot for centuries. With them being awake, who's keeping these people, propped up on a pedestal? Why do we still support something? They should be outcasts of society, Planned Parenthood. It should be closed up and locked up yesterday. Why isn't it?
Well, I think we're starting to see, the corner turned on this a little bit. But I think that, understanding how long it's been going on, there's a quote that I've heard many a times. It says, "He who writes history is always famous." And I think that this was the case with Margaret Sanger. I think it was the case with Planned Parenthood. And this is that double speak, where they're going to, mutilate young children's genitalia in the name of transgenderism, but call it, gender affirming care. Yeah. Where they're going to rip a baby out of a woman's uterus, but call that, women's health care. And so this is that double speak that we're seeing. It's an attempt to kind of, move the ball radically forward while using the language that they feel is going to be more socially acceptable. And they've done a great job from a PR standpoint, really hiding the motives and motivation behind this. I think, though, people are starting to wake up, as you mentioned. I think we're starting to see that. We're seeing some of these larger Planned Parenthoods, start to get defunded, starting to close down. We need more of that, though. We have to continue. We're so close, and I think we have to keep the fight up.
Pastor Lucas Miles, go get his book called Pagan Threat, Confronting America's Godless Uprising. They seem to be using our value system against us. And for a long time, they pushed people into the corner and made them be quiet. I'll give you an example about abortion. I had a guy call in one day. I forget what the topic was. It wasn't just abortion. You like it or not. I mean, that's just boring because people are going to have their sides, and it's not a very interesting conversation. But there was something going on legislatively or something. It might have been Roe v. Wade being overturned. And a guy called in and said, I am pro-choice. It's a woman's right to control her body, but I would never be part of an abortion. And I said, well, stop. Then you're pro-life. No, I'm not. I think that she should have the choice. Well, if she's in your life, does she have the choice, I would ask? And his answer would be, well, no, I would never take part. Then you're pro-life. Why can't you say that? And there was silence, Pastor, for a while. Then he said, I guess you're right. They've been beaten over the head so much, figuratively, that they're afraid to say what they really believe. It's like they want to get along or something. Is that part of this pagan push? Let's make them at least say they agree with us, even if they don't.
I think that very much. I mean, this is kind of what's driving cancel culture. Again, cancel culture, I think, is religiously motivated in many ways. It's this extreme, fundamental, pagan zealousness that says you have to agree with me. If you don't, we're going to force you to agree in this way. It's sort of an inquisition in that sense.
Right.
I was at the University of Georgia's campus here last week. Actually, I had a young girl stand up, and she had a Christian background, but she says she struggles with this idea of not allowing choice in the issue of rape. And I said, well, let's talk about that for a minute. And so I said, do you believe it would be wrong for somebody to force themselves on that young girl to basically to take advantage of her body, to violently overtake her? And she says, yes, yes, yes. I said, then you're against also a doctor coming in, a so-called doctor coming in and ripping that child out of the womb. It's the same evil. The same evil that rapes the young girl is the same evil that also rips that baby out of the womb. If you're against that forceful takeover of somebody's body in one case, you should be against it in the other case. So I think when you just logically think these things through, have a chance to dialogue about that. Charlie Kirk was so good at that, being able to hand the mic to the other side and have those rich exchanges and be able to provide, robust responses there. I think you start to see that, people are actually, I think, more in favor of conservative policies than they think they are, but they have, it's been the pressure from the other side to conform because this overwhelming push that, if you don't think this certain way, then you're a bigot or you're hateful or, racist or something like that.
Let's juxtapose the uprising in Christianity and a belief system, Bibles being sold, people buying your book called Pagan Threat. Go and get it right now. It's Pastor Lucas Miles. Let's juxtapose that with what's going on in New York City. In New York City, you got a guy who claims he's a Muslim, but then he also claims he's LGBTQ. He also claims, not that he is, but that he supports them. He's making all sorts of claims that religion doesn't believe in. Clearly, he's a Marxist. Clearly, he is a democratic socialist, whatever that means, and he's probably going to win. In this day and age, in the United States of America, how is that possible that a man like that can win the mayor's office in the largest city in this country when we know we're having a revival? That's not just you and me talking about it. There is a legitimate revival happening in this country. You can see how TPUSA has grown from a movement to a revolution after the murder of Charlie Kirk. How is that going on in New York? Do you know?
It's interesting. We are seeing sort of this amalgamation of different beliefs that are joining together and gaining a lot of momentum, I think, in standing against the more dominant, Christian, Judeo-Christian framework, liberty framework of our nation. I think Islam by itself, Marxism by itself, LGBT movement by itself doesn't really have enough, gumption in it or support behind it in order to, be effective. But what you're seeing sort of this hitching the wagon to each other. Now, these ideas are opposed to each other just by nature. There's no room in Islam for LGBT movement. That would be apostate in every form. And so any true Muslim would recognize that. But for the sake of kind of, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, that they will grab a hold of these things together, at least for a time. Eventually, they'll separate when they have to finally duke it out. And I think Marxists are in a lot of, world of hurt when Islam really gets to the point to where it is allowed to be more dominant. And we're starting to see that in Europe and other places as well. They'll think it's their friend in the short term, but it won't be their friend in the long term. But I think that we as Americans, we have to see through this. We have to see what's happening. This is that Marxist useful idiot where anybody that has, feels oppressed, by this oppressor is going to join forces with us, and we're going to go against the man. It's a lie, it's a deception, and it's going to not only ruin New York City, but it has a chance of ruining this nation if we don't recognize it real quick.
It is just such an interesting juxtaposition, in my opinion. I mean, we're seeing this revival that we're talking about, and I'm so glad that it's happening because people are now going, okay, I can say it out loud. What I always felt, Charlie gave me that ability to do that by giving his literal life for the movement. It is author, Pastor Lucas Miles. He, of course, the senior faith director at TPUSA. Were you there the day that he died?
So I wasn't there in Utah. I received a call. I was actually on vacation that day, and I was out of the country. I got the call from my assistant, and as soon as I saw the phone ring, I knew my assistant wouldn't have called me while I was on vacation unless something bad had happened. My heart
Yeah.
just sank. I picked up the phone. He told me Charlie had been shot. We didn't know how bad it was yet, and we made plans immediately to come home, but went to Phoenix right away, and it's been a whirlwind ever since. I mean, really, the last nearly 50 days now have been nonstop. But we appreciate so much the groundswell of support and prayers from around this nation. We're seeing so many victories for Christ, for conservatism, for just a lot of wins on the other side of this, but all through really the lens of grief. And it's easy to want to just trade all of this to have Charlie back. But as one of our team said that Charlie wouldn't make that trade. And so much of what we're seeing right now is what Charlie gave his whole life working towards. And now we're starting to see that really come through. And so we're going to continue this. We don't want him to allow him to die in vain, and we're going to keep the work going.
Would he have realized, would he have ever thought it would be this? Again, he was willing to put his life on the line and in fact did that for this country, for Jesus, for his family, for all of that. Do you think he would have realized how fast it would have? What I said earlier wasn't hyperbole. A movement, great movement, is becoming a revolution. Would he have did he see that coming? Did he know that would happen?
I think over the last really couple years, probably the last 2 years in particular, Charlie's, his stock grew tremendously. Him getting recognized in public, and with that came obviously a lot of attacks, a lot of threats, everything else. And so, Charlie knew the dangers that were out there. I mean, he talked about these very openly. There's all sorts of sound bites where he's warning about those things. I think he understood when he went on campuses that there was always some sort of a risk. He tried to do everything he could to minimize that and mitigate that risk in being out there. But it was really his love for this generation that continued him to keep pushing forward and to, putting himself out there, even at the risk of personal peril. I don't know as though, any of us could have thought that Charlie's assassination would lead to this sort of response on the other side. It's really only God that can make that happen. I mean, Charlie, he did what he always taught everybody to do, and that was just to say, "Here I am, Lord, send me, use me." And he did that. He did that every single day, and he did that on that day, September 10th, when he went to UVU and ultimately gave his life and paid the ultimate price. And so it's been a whirlwind, but you know what? I just believe that God's not done with this story yet, and we're going to continue to see victory after victory for Christ.
Pastor Lucas Miles, go in right now to lucasmiles.org. Get the book called Pagan Threat, Confronting America's Godless Uprising. Just the last bit on Charlie, and I appreciate all the time today. And I want everybody to go and buy this book, get 5 books, keep one, send 4 to friends and family. He and I were friends professionally. He was on the show 6 different times. He started when he was 23 or 24 on my show. And I found the guy to have this unbelievable iron backbone that he believed what he believed, yet at the same time he had this ability that I at my age, having done this 36 years, don't really even have. I don't suffer fools very easily. He allowed it. He allowed them to come to the microphone. I think that's why the movement has become a revolution, because the other side was allowed to get the time of day, was allowed to get the air and say what you want to say, and then he would come back, and I never saw him lose a debate. But he had this ability, and it sounds like you probably have the ability too, to hear somebody out, let them say what they're going to say, even though that they will say things like, "I hate you," because of what you believe. And then by the end of it, those who are watching and listening got a whole lot out of that. It was a very rare talent that he had. I found him to be a very nice guy, but yet at the same time a very firm man. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think Charlie really knew who he was. And I think what you're seeing there and what you experienced was that, Charlie was extremely secure in his identity. He knew who he was in the Lord. He knew who he was as a husband, as a father, as a boss, as a visionary. He was very confident in those things. And so there was no insecurity there. So if somebody, said they didn't like him, or somebody came with a different, view, it didn't affect him because it didn't define him. He knew where his definitions were at. I think also simultaneously his tremendous love for this next generation and desire to reach people really drove him. And so he was willing to have what Scripture would call long suffering, in these moments, as he kind of painstakingly, listened to somebody's view or their rant in some capacity, and look for that opportunity to be able to minister to them, speak to their delusion or doubt, and hopefully win them over, for the sake of the gospel or for the nation. And I think that's really, if you want to understand Charlie, that's really paramount, to understanding kind of what drove him in those day-to-day experiences.
Charlie wrote the foreword for this book. It's called Pagan Threat, Confronting America's Godless Uprising. I hope everybody goes and reads this and understands, we're in a position right now which is an inflection point. And I mentioned this a couple of times. When the Tea Party happened in 2009, that looked really great, and then it kind of fell apart because there were all sorts of factions going every different way. This appears to be a revolution where everybody gets it. They understand what the message is. And by the way, you're not by any means, and neither am I, and Charlie never said, you can't worship how you see fit. We're just going through a process right now of realizing that the way this country was founded and the value system that we have is a Judeo-Christian value system, and Christians need to stand up tall and be heard. You're not telling other people you must do what I do, right? You're just saying this is how the country always was. We need to fight off the pagan movement.
And look, and I think that religions should speak for themselves. What we're seeing, though, is a deliberate funding of an agenda, and it's not an open agenda. Like, look, I'm open with my agenda. I want to see the whole world won over for Jesus Christ because I believe he's the way, the truth, and the life, and the only way to be saved. But I don't want somebody to be coerced into that. I don't want somebody to be forced into that. I don't want somebody to be brainwashed secretly into that. And what we're seeing, with paganism and Marxism and these things right now is sort of this cloak and dagger, smoke and mirrors sort of approach to brainwashing people to these ideas and pushing them upon the American people. It's a very different approach to what we see in evangelism among Christians. Right. And I think that this ideological war that's taking place should concern everybody. I'm for pluralism in the sense that, you're welcome and free to worship who you want to worship. I just want to make sure that we're not, brainwashing our children without them knowing it in order to reject God and embrace some sort of pagan worldview.
Makes perfect sense. At Lucas Miles over on X. Go follow him now, lucasmiles.org. Get the book Pagan Threat, Confronting America's Godless Uprising. It looks like it's going to be an amazing book. I don't have it yet, but I'm going to get it, Pastor. I appreciate you doing it, and congratulations on the New York Times bestseller list. Let's do this again soon, can we?
Would love to. Thank you.
I appreciate you. We're back after this. Stay right here.